He swiftly turned the handlebars, flipping them upwards. Then, he adjusted his posture, lying down on the bicycle. Unexpectedly, the speed increased dramatically, and in no time, he overtook his friend who was far ahead. His friend asked how he managed to do it. Instead of answering, he went home and immediately dismantled the washing machine, taking out the high-speed bearings. Then, he gathered various scrap materials and welded them together one by one. In the end, he pieced together a racing bike of his dreams. However, his friends, looking at this oddly shaped bicycle, couldn't help but feel a bit uneasy and doubtful. Because Obree wanted to use it to break the world record, knowing that the bicycles used by famous athletes are meticulously designed by computers and cost as much as $500,000. Yet, his junk bike wasn't even worth $50. But what no one expected was that he not only broke the world record twice with this junk but also became known as the Flying Scotsman in the civilized world. What's even more incredible is that this is a true story. Since he was young, Obree didn't communicate much with others and was often bullied by his peers. This left an indelible shadow in his heart, making him increasingly self-conscious and timid. His father, a police officer, asked him more than once who did it, but he never had the courage to name those people. Fortunately, his father didn't press him further but instead gave him a bicycle for Christmas, allowing him to escape from the bullies and giving his lonely childhood a moment of respite. Like the wheels spinning forward, time quickly moved to 1993. At this point, 28-year-old Obree was married with children, but the knots in his heart from childhood led to severe depression. He constantly struggled between frustration and oppression, with terrifying whispers always echoing in his ears. Only when riding on the road could he temporarily escape the pain. Therefore, he often participated in various British races as an amateur and accidentally won a national championship. Although this gave him some fame in the cycling community, it didn't change his difficult living situation. To take on the responsibility of supporting his family, he had to deliver packages while running a bicycle shop. However, due to malicious competition from peers, he had to lower his prices. As a result, the more he slashed prices, the more fiercely customers haggled. A $30 item was only sold for $20, following the principle of minimizing losses. Obree could only reluctantly agree and said he would deliver it to the door. To his surprise, the other person dismissively said, "How can your bicycle be faster than my car?" At that moment, Obree's competitive spirit was ignited. He immediately bet the man, "If you drive to the destination first, I won't charge a penny for this bike. Otherwise, you have to pay me $30 at the original price." Not only that, to ensure fairness, he also brought in a priest as a witness. Faced with what seemed like a sure bet, the man readily agreed. And so, a speed showdown between the bicycle and the car officially began. At first, the man easily left Obree behind. But Obree's determination was not to be underestimated. He recklessly sped through an intersection, ran a red light, and overtook the lead. Seeing this, the man immediately became anxious. He then floored the gas pedal, turning his 82-year-old truck into a Ferrari. However, Obree was not willing to show weakness. The advantage of a bicycle is that it can take shortcuts freely. Just when the man thought victory was in his grasp, Obree burst out from another intersection. But due to a lack of space, they collided. Fortunately, Obree was not injured. Unfortunately, he regrettably lost. However, despite losing $20, he didn't regret it at all. Because he adheres to a firm philosophy of doing things. No matter what, seize the opportunity and give it your all. His spirit not only inspired the nearby priest but also made the priest an important driving force on his journey to pursue his dreams. The next day, Obree, who hadn't made any money, continued delivering packages. Meanwhile, the other marquis, seeing this, asked in confusion, "You're a famous figure in the British cycling community. Why are you still doing this errand work? It's a waste of talent, a real shame." But Obree said, "Fame can't be eaten, nor can it help me pay my bills." After hearing this, Marquis also shook his head helplessly. After work, the two of them, as usual, rode together on the highway. During a break, Marquis took out a magazine that said the famous racer Boardman was going to challenge a world record that had stood for 9 years. Since he had once been neck and neck with Boardman, upon learning this, Obree's fighting spirit was instantly ignited, but the primary challenge now was how to increase speed. Just then, he had a flash of inspiration and turned the handlebars, which were originally facing down, upwards. After returning home, he immediately went with Marquis to the junkyard to steal materials. Unexpectedly, this scene was witnessed by the pastor. However, not only did the pastor not intend to report them, he even curiously asked about their plan. Upon hearing this, Obree excitedly explained that when skiing, everyone bends down to reduce resistance, thus conforming to aerodynamics. Since that's the case, cycling can definitely imitate this. So, I'm planning to build an unprecedented bicycle to break the world record for the 1-hour endurance race. But Malchi poured cold water on his enthusiasm. They had no money to buy materials, no place to build the bike, and most importantly, challenging the record required renting a world-class indoor track, which would cost a fortune. However, Obree felt that none of this was a problem because he had already decided to make Malchi his manager to get sponsorships, and Moose was willing to provide a warehouse as Obree's bike building base. Thus, the trio officially formed their team. As they raised their glasses in celebration, Obree was determined to complete the challenge a week before the scheduled date, which meant he only had 8 weeks left. So, he began a hellish training regimen. The pastor was very worried about his health. After all, cycling intensely for an hour seemed like suicide to ordinary people. But Obree said, which cycling champion hasn't endured suffering? Yet they all keep pushing forward just to reach that moment of creating a miracle. Since he spent all his time building the bike and training, Obree hadn't gone out to deliver packages and earn money for a long time, which made his already not wealthy family even worse off. However, his wife not only didn't complain but also volunteered to work overtime to support the family. Perhaps behind every successful man, there's a wife who silently contributes. And Obree didn't let her down, spending every day either training or on his way to training. Moreover, he would optimize the bike he was building based on his training experiences. Finally, after numerous improvements, the perfect bike in his mind was born. But looking at the shabby patched-up product, everyone present was dumbfounded. Only his wife smiled and offered encouragement. Although not optimistic about this antique, Malchi still accompanied Obree for a road test. As a result, because the chosen route was too dangerous, the two had their first argument. Malchi felt that the bike looked very unstable, and if it fell apart during the ride, Obree could lose his life. But Obree was unconcerned. Some even think this car perfectly adheres to the laws of physics, with every design having a scientific basis. Riding it will surely break records. Due to constant disagreements, they eventually parted on bad terms. Feeling rejected, Obree became despondent and anxious. He initially wanted to confide in a pastor, but upon reaching the church, he left with renewed confidence. Because he suddenly felt that it was a sign of cowardice. Meanwhile, Marky acted as if nothing had happened and continued seeking sponsorships. Initially, he faced constant rejections. Even when he pretended to be a social elite, his awkward demeanor quickly gave him away. Just as he was about to give up, a friend recommended a wealthy tycoon to him. He soon got in touch with the person. During the meeting, the tycoon listened intently, and seeing this, Marky explained even more enthusiastically. Unexpectedly, the next moment, the tycoon started taking off his clothes. Marky thought he was about to face some unspoken rules and seriously considered whether he should sacrifice for his friend's dream. However, the tycoon quickly changed into sportswear. It turned out the tycoon was also a cycling enthusiast and had heard about Obree's story long ago. So, after understanding the whole situation, he readily agreed to sponsor them. Since the cycling venue was in Norway, Marky used the remaining sponsorship funds to buy plane tickets to Norway for the Obree couple, while he paid his own way there. Soon after, Obree finally faced the challenge day. However, just as he was about to assemble his bike, Marky suddenly called him aside. Then, a brand new professional racing bike came into view. It turned out that for safety reasons, Marky had convinced the sponsor to replicate Obree's bike exactly. As long as Obree broke the world record riding this bike, he would receive a full year of sponsorship. Initially, Obree was hesitant because the new bike was much heavier than his old one, making it more strenuous to ride. But to not disappoint his friend and to secure funding for the next year, he ultimately chose to compromise. While waiting, the record holder of the event and the higher-ups of the Cycling Association approached. In fact, they didn't have much faith in Obree, but seeing the unique bike, they asked a few questions. Obree thought they doubted the bike's compliance, so he immediately assured them it fully met WCF standards. Unexpectedly, the other party said, "I don't care about the car, I only care if he can break the record." However, later, they ended up slapping themselves in the face. As the referee's countdown ended, Obree stepped on the pedal, desperately accelerating. To break the world record, he had to complete 51 kilometers in 1 hour, which meant circling the track 250 times. At first, the progress was smooth, but the heavy bike was consuming his energy significantly, and before even halfway through, he was already gasping for breath. Worse still, the monotonous track was hard for her, who was used to training outdoors all year round. As her energy gradually depleted, the demons of her childhood whispered back into her mind. His wife noticed something was wrong and tried to wake her sleeping thoughts with shouts, but everyone knew that at Obree's current speed, there was no hope of breaking the record. Sure enough, when the end bell rang, she was still 2 full laps short. The high-ranking officials of the Cycling Association saw this and laughed gleefully. Obree, who had exhausted every last bit of strength for his dream, couldn't accept this result. His wife comforted him, telling him not to lose heart and encouraging him that there would be more opportunities in the future. But he knew very well that he hadn't fully utilized his abilities. So, after calming down, he proactively requested to try again at 9 the next morning. Although the association's higher-ups were very unwilling and even used the rules to refute him, the venue he rented wouldn't expire until 10:30 the next morning, so he was fully entitled to continue using it until then. Thus, he secured a second chance. But having 2 high-intensity competitions in such a short time would be too much even for a marathon runner. Yet Obree refused to give up or admit defeat. So, that night, he kept drinking water, using it to replace the thoughts in his mind, waking himself up every 2 hours to exercise and ensure his legs were in the best condition. On the other side, Marky didn't slack off either. He felt guilty, thinking that his last-minute bike change led to Obree's failure, so he stayed up all night merging and optimizing the two bikes. When Obree woke up the next day and saw this, he was very touched. Then they rushed to the venue urgently. But it wasn't until 9:30 that the staff arrived late. Perhaps out of mutual respect between competitors, the former champion kindly advised Obree that he might suffer muscle breakdown and not to ruin himself for a moment of impulse. But Obree still resolutely came to the starting line. The deep-seated faith in his heart, the unwavering support of his friends, and his wife's unconditional trust all transformed into his strength on the track. He was like a red lightning bolt, charging forward with unstoppable force. The sound of him cutting through the wind echoed throughout the venue, and his resilience inspired everyone present. His wife and Marky shouted with excitement, and even the former champion couldn't help but start cheering for Obree. At that moment, a gunshot suddenly rang out, signaling that Obree was just one punch away from victory. Although at this moment his body was nearing its limit, the fruits of victory were right in front of him. Even if his mind was already blurred, his speed did not slow down at all. In the end, he successfully broke the 9-year world record. Everyone present cheered with joy. The sponsor even handed him a check for $400,000 and promised to cover Obree's sponsorship fees for the next year. At this moment, all the glory and honor belonged to the unyielding Obree. But just as everyone was raising their glasses to celebrate him, he slipped away to a dark corner alone. Marky saw this and wanted to go over and ask what was wrong, but was stopped by Obree's wife. It turned out that Obree, bound by childhood nightmares, could never fully join in the cheering crowd. His wife understood his feelings and was willing to give him the private space to process. With such understanding, what more could one ask for? In the blink of an eye, a week passed, and the famous chess player Boardman began a new challenge. His wife and friends gathered nervously around the TV to watch. Meanwhile, Obree chose to go out for a ride. An hour later, Boardman broke his record, and his championship title lasted only a week. To make matters worse, it suddenly started to rain heavily, and his bike got a flat tire in the rain. Helpless, he had to carry his bike to a nearby bar and use the phone to call Marky for help. At this moment, a few drunken thugs suddenly started to pick on him, mocking him for being a coward even though he had won the championship. It turned out these were the scumbags who used to bully Obree as a child. They not only spewed insults but also tried to block Obree's way as they did before. But this time, Obree didn't back down or run away. Instead, he raised his bike and fought back. After all these years, he finally learned the courage his father taught him to face challenges. The thugs, who were so arrogant just moments ago, were intimidated by his presence and watched silently as he turned and left. After returning home, Obree immediately decided to participate in the bicycle chase against Boardman 5 weeks later, determined to reclaim his championship and glory. Although he understood his feelings, Marky still suggested he challenge at the end of the year. This way, he would have more time to train and could secure more sponsorships and resources. But Obree insisted on striking while the iron was hot, believing that only pressure would keep him at his peak. In the blink of an eye, 5 weeks passed. Obree was still riding his self-designed antique, while Boardman's superbike was computer-designed and made entirely of carbon fiber, costing £500,000. The gap in hardware between the two was obvious. Moreover, Obree's strength lay in his endurance as a long-distance rider, but this was a 4-kilometer chase, testing the rider's explosiveness. So, Obree had no advantage, yet he was not afraid at all, because legends are made by people, and the impossible is meant to be broken. This is what a miracle is. In the end, Obree did not disappoint himself or others, winning the duel by a margin of 2 and breaking the world record once again. His wife, in front of the TV, was dancing with excitement, and the pastor watching the live broadcast was genuinely proud of Obree. Even Boardman, as his opponent, gave away his expensive helmet to express his admiration and respect for Obree. Perhaps this is the meaning of sportsmanship. After returning to his country, Obree received official recognition from the government, and the public respectfully called him the Flying Scotsman. At this moment, he felt the glory of being a champion. It was a wonderful feeling of being admired and encouraged by everyone. However, dark clouds always gather around the stars. The people from the Cycling Association were dissatisfied, discussing how if a world record could be broken with a bike made from junk, why would anyone pay high prices for their materials? So, the profit-driven capitalists immediately held a press conference, claiming that Obree's bike design was too dangerous and could threaten other riders if it fell, and it must be completely banned. Moreover, they used the same reason to suspend Obree for 6 months. Despite Obree's explanations to the media, he could not withstand the power of authority, and a sense of defeat arose. Fortunately, his wife always stood by his side, encouraging him that being downcast wouldn't solve the problem, and only by facing challenges head-on could he turn the tide. With his wife's support, Obree quickly found a solution. Since the association deemed his car unsafe, he later installed 2 auxiliary supports. Unexpectedly, the association immediately made a new rule, saying his seat was 5 centimeters too long. After hearing this, Obree was not angry. Instead, he immediately shortened the car seat. The association then said the car must remain intact and use commercially available parts. Obree found replacements in civilian cars. It can be said that every time the association made unreasonable demands, Obree always found a way to respond. However, when he finally made it to the championship, the association targeted him with a harsh move, prohibiting him from using a low stance. If his chest touched his hands, he would be flagged with a red card, and after 3 times, he would be disqualified. Despite Obree's best efforts to adjust during the competition, the judges caught him twice. Helpless, he had to focus all his energy on his posture, which directly caused him to lose balance and fall heavily on the track. Thus, a once great athlete fell from grace. In the days that followed, Obree fell into a pit of self-doubt. Every day, he either drank alone at home or stared blankly at his own posters. One day, as she watched the footage of her fall on TV over and over, the humiliation she once faced seemed to hover like a fly at her door, trampling on her dignity. If her previous success gave her the courage to resist, her current failure undoubtedly knocked her back to rock bottom. Unable to endure the torment any longer, Obree carried his beloved car into the depths of the dark forest, deciding to end his humiliating life. Fortunately, God did not abandon her. At the critical moment, the rope broke, and a passing beggar found her and took her to the hospital. Her wife, who rushed over in panic upon hearing the news, feared it would happen again and urged Obree to see a psychologist. But Obree still couldn't face the scars in his heart and insisted he could handle everything. Although his wife was furious, she knew that forcing him would only backfire. So, she stopped persuading him. After an unknown period, Obree finally found a moment of clarity amidst his despair, seeing how much his wife had sacrificed for the family and children. Feeling guilty, he expressed that he would continue delivering packages to support the family. Meanwhile, the people at the Norwegian sports hall suddenly sent him an old floorboard to commemorate his historic achievements in the hall. It seems that life is not just an endless stretch of thorns. There can also be unexpected surprises. And on this day, the pastor's words ignited the extinguished spirit of Obree. It turns out that the church in town is about to be demolished, and the pastor will leave at the end of the month. But before that, he wants to help Obree overcome his inner demons. So, pointing to a photo on the wall, he said, "This is my late wife. She, like you, suffered from severe depression, feeling that everything around her was a swamp, and was eventually completely consumed by darkness. Later, I kept thinking, if I had noticed her abnormality earlier and listened to her heart, would she not have left me? So, to make up for the regret of those years and to save more people, I chose to become a pastor." After hearing this, Obree gently expressed that confiding is meaningless because it cannot change what has already happened. But the pastor said, "If you don't try, how will you know the result?" Just like that, Obree opened up for the first time. It turns out that those who once humiliated him caused him severe self-loathing, making him feel worthless and without value. That's why he kept challenging himself, trying to mend his nearly shattered heart. But unfortunately, he was once again trapped by capital. Despite the failure, it wasn't due to his lack of ability, but for someone without confidence, it was undoubtedly a heavy blow. Finally, understanding his heart, the pastor didn't offer much authority, but firmly told him, "You just need to charge forward bravely and tenaciously like when you first rode a bike, and all the darkness will be left behind you." At this moment, Obree suddenly realized that from the beginning, he found the light in his life through cycling. How could he easily give up now? Moreover, when he returned home, he saw a drawing by his son, which depicted him as a hero in his son's eyes. To not let down his family, and even more so himself, Obree decided to challenge the world champion again. He then trained intensely, focusing on getting back to his peak condition. In the blink of an eye, the day of the World Championship finals arrived. Amidst the intense cheers, Obree once again stood on the stage of the finals, having learned from his previous experience. He added padding to the handlebars to comply with the rule that his chest couldn't touch his hands. As the gunshot sounded, the race officially began. Although this time his opponent was younger and more explosive, Obree wasn't worried at all, because the one he needed to defeat was never others, but the cowardly self within. Meanwhile, the pastor was praying for him on a tranquil lake. Family members gathered at the bar to cheer him on. His wife sat in the audience, shouting for him. Marlsey stood by the track, encouraging him. The entire crowd was loudly chanting, "Go, Obree, the flying man," their belief forming a powerful chorus. Obree pushed forward, striving to chase his dreams, and he could feel this strength. He had been knocked down countless times, had wandered indecisively in the rain, but now, every breath he took was filled with determination. Those dark days will eventually pass. All the poetic moments will fade away. No one is born with armor, but resilient perseverance can make one invincible. In the end, Obree won the World Championship for the second time, crushing every doubting opponent with his strength. A strong competitor gave him a humble embrace. The association's executives sincerely awarded her the honor she deserved. The pastor on the boat raised a glass in her direction to celebrate. All the spectators present and those in front of their TVs shouted for her success, while she quietly wrote down the names of everyone who had helped her, thanking them for their support. The film, The Flying Scotsman, was directed by Douglas Mackinnon, starring Johnny Lee Miller and Brian Cox, and was released in 2007 as a legendary movie. The film is based on the true story of Scottish cyclist Graeme Obree. Graeme grew up struggling to make a living in the southwest of Scotland. Despite lacking funds and sponsorship, he was passionately devoted to cycling competitions. Later, with the help of his wife and friend Jim, he used parts from an old washing machine to create a revolutionary bicycle, naming it Old Faithful. With this unique bike, at the age of 28, he broke the 9-year-old world hour record for track cycling in the city of Norway with a distance of 51 kilometers, previously held by Francesco Moser. Although this record was surpassed a week later by Chris Boardman, he set a new record the following year at 52.713 kilometers and held onto it. Moreover, he won the World Track Cycling Individual Pursuit Championship in 1993 and 1995. Although his innovative riding position was later banned, it became a classic in cycling history. However, the most noteworthy thing is, he overcame depression through extreme sports, making his once incomplete soul whole again. Perhaps not everyone can have the extraordinary ideas and talents like Glarmy, but everyone can have the courage and perseverance like him. Life is like a racetrack. Achieving goals may be full of uncertainties, but the spirit of never stopping is the best interpretation of life's value. When the day comes that the bitterness turns to sweetness, the mountains and stars will become songs of praise for us. Before that, what we need to do is act in the present, entrust the results to time, and use optimism and passion to overcome the fatigue and hardships of life. Even if you fall into a deep abyss, you must strive to climb from the bottom, be tempered in deserted alleys, and shine brightly on the high stage under the spotlight. You don't necessarily have to look up to live, but you must turn the tide against the wind. Believe that even the longest nightmare has a moment when it was torn apart by the dawn, and the hardest night road will eventually welcome the light of dawn and vitality. Alright, that's all for today's movie sharing. Please like, comment, and share. Looking forward to our next meeting.